So by now you've probably seen the 17-foot long media center that I built for my home. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I designed the entire thing in Shapr3D, who is a sponsor of this video. I've been using Shapr3D for a while now, and they recently came out with a beta that has some really cool features that they're going to introduce to their full version later on this year. And this feature is called history-based parametric modeling, which is totally awesome. The great thing about history-based parametric modeling is it's going to save you so much time when it comes to editing and modifying your project on Shapr3D. Let's go and look at the final product that we're going to build here. So as you can see, this is exactly what I built for my living room. And in this model particularly, you're able to adjust almost everything to fit it to your project, to your living room area. So in this case, let's say I want to make the overall width of the entire build less than 204, let's say 115. Everything will scale appropriately. And let's say the height is a little bit higher than what I have. I have 8-foot ceilings. So let's say you have 10-foot ceilings. We'll go 120. And there you go. Everything scales appropriately. You can change the base of this. If you want a higher base cabinet there, let's say you want the height of this arch section to be a little bit lower, 24 inches. As you can see, the shelves automatically adjust by themselves. So that's what we're going to build in this video. But before we get into that, I wanted to go over a few of the sort of beginner stuff that I think will be helpful if you are new to Shapr3D. When you open up the software, this is what you're going to be met with. And you can create new project folders like I did here for the living room project. And anything that you build for that project could be in this one single folder, which is awesome for organization. So I'm just going to click on the top right over here, new project. And this is what you'll be met with. You can see, like typical, you have your coordinates laid out, the X, Y, and Z coordinates. On your top right over here, you have different options you can choose when it comes to laying out the interface. Over here is your units. I typically work in inches. If you want to lock your grid, as you can see, if I zoom out and zoom in, the squares in the background, it adjusts accordingly. And I typically don't I don't find any use in that because I'm not relying on the grids to lock in my points. I would type in the dimensions myself, so I'm not relying on it too much. I work in fractions of an inch. You can change that to decimals. And also with your degrees, you can change that to fraction or decimal as well. And on the top over here, you can snap to those grids if you want to. You have 3D grid points. So there's a lot of adjustments you can make depending on how you choose to work within the space. And then as you can see to the right of that, that's your history workflow, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. On the right, these are all of your components that when you're drawing, when you're sketching, the right side will fill up and populate. Your tools are located on the right, on the left over here as well. Sketch tools, transform tools, everything you need. To get a better understanding on how powerful the history-based parametric modeling feature is, I'm going to show you this example of the box here. I'm going to copy this box over to the other side. And normally with direct modeling, I would have to go in and individually change these boxes if I need to make any changes. So let's say you have a cabinet box and you're building cabinets box separately. If you want to make change to one, you have to go in and then make change to the other. So for instance, if I were to create a shell with this box here, let's say it's 3/4 of an inch for our sidewall, it doesn't change the other side of the other new box. So what I have to do is I have to go in and make another shell path, another shell tool, use that shell tool again, and then make the shell for the other box. So that is just time consuming. It's a waste of time. So here's what I'll do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that really quick. And since I made the shell here already, and I have a copy of this box over here, and it doesn't matter how many copies I make. Let's go back a bit. So let's say I copy this 10 times, or for the sake, let's just copy it. Let's just copy it 3 times. Okay, so I have 3 copies here, and as you can see, there the history has populated with these 3 movement actions there. So what I'll do is I'm going to create a shell for the first box, 3/4 of an inch. And as you can see in the history, we have a new action available, which is the shell that I just did. I can take that shell, move it right above the movement actions, and it's going to apply that shell across all the boxes. So what I did is I just took that action that I did, move it earlier in the timeline to make it seem as though I made that shell before I copied the rest of the boxes. That's a very unique feature when it comes to making these modifications, especially when you're dealing with a complex model. It's going to save so much time, and that's the huge difference between direct modeling versus parametric modeling. Now let's start modeling the actual media center. When dealing with these complex models, I like to break things down to smaller, manageable chunks. So we're going to model the base cabinet first, the upper arch section, and then the doors. If you're new to CAD and 3D modeling, this is going to help so much to keep things less overwhelming. So let's start off with a brand new project. I'm going to go ahead and start by working on the front. It's a front view, and I'm going to create a sketch. Typically what I like to do is I will draw rectangles based off of the center origin. This helps me establish just a midpoint for any referencing that I need, especially if I need to mirror something. There's always a middle reference point that I can go off of, which is that middle origin there. So I have my rectangle drawn here, and I'm going to set my dimensions. The height of the entire console is 96 inches. And then the width is 204 inches. Whoops. Do that again, 204, there we go. So that is my overall dimensions of the entire project. And at this point, you can always create a construction line like so that it gives you just an origin to original sketch to reference off of, but you don't really necessarily have to do it this way. What I also will do is I'm going to lock this middle point so that if I do make any alterations, it's not going to move from that origin point. So now let's start modeling the base. The first thing that I'll start off with is modeling our base structure, which is just a simple toe kick here. And I changed from the center to diagonal since I've already established the overall project dimensions. I'm just going to use the diagonal to make it a little bit simpler to draw here. So this, I know for my height, I want it 3.5 inches. And then the width is just going to follow the overall width of the project. So if I change this to 200, everything changes accordingly. It's great that you go back and check your work before moving on, making sure that everything is tied together, everything is moving correctly. So let's go back to 204. And then I'm going to draw the upper cabinets. And I'm making sure for these rectangles, I'm hitting that edge point there, as you can see. I want to make sure that the point is locked onto the edge. That way it gives me this automatic constraint here of the coincidence. So instead of going in and manually doing it, it's already set to auto constraint, which is nice. I don't have to worry about it. This we're going to set at 18 inches, right? So if we move back and forth, it should still work. All right, so now let's go ahead and give us a line for the countertop. My countertop material is 1 1/8. So we're gonna go 1 1/8. That's just the thickness of my material. I'm going to do the profile, which is 3.5 inches later in 3D because it does overlap the lower cabinets. So I got that all modeled out. Since I have 4 lower cabinet boxes, I need to make sure that the dividers in between each will scale appropriately. So if I go to 300, it's going to scale all the way to 300. Those dividers will be spaced out evenly, so my cabinets box will be equally spaced, equally sized. I know that this looks a little bit tedious, but it's important to invest the time in the front end to set all of these parameters up. It's going to make the parametric workflow so much simpler later whenever you go to make modifications. It's all going to be linked perfectly. So invest a little bit more time in the front end to get all of your sketches done properly. The first way is we can create a pattern. So if I draw a line at the edge there, and I'm going to use that line as a pattern, and I'm going to say, I think 3 is a good enough. Total distance will be that 204 inches that we need more than 3. We need 4. So I have 4 there. Actually, let's do 5 because I need one for the end too. So 5, and then we're going to go 204 inches. So now I have 4 boxes that are evenly spaced. However, because the patterning only gives me 2 different definitions here, total distance and spacing distance, it's going to automatically follow that dimensions. I would have to go in and manually change that dimension each time. And I don't want to do that. I want to just change my overall dimension and then have the dividers divide themselves out accordingly. So let's take a look here. If I change this to 150, as you can notice, this thing still is linked to 204. So I have to go in and change that to 250. Then it will change. I don't want that to happen. In the future, what we can just simply use the total length based off of our overall length here, and they would divide accordingly. If that makes sense. That's something that I know that they're working on, which will be awesome. So since that is not going to work for now, we will have to do this a little bit differently, a little bit more manual work. However, it's still going to work out in the end. So I'm going to draw these 3 lines here. I'm making sure to actually hit the edge so that it's connected to that edge. So I'm going to connect all the center points of these lines using another line. Then I'll highlight that middle line, make construction. That way it doesn't divide up my surface. And what I'll do is I'll select those mid lines that I just drew, and I'll hit equal. So that equal constraint has now given me all of my dividing lines here equal distance between each other. So if I go to adjust the overall width, those things will adjust accordingly as well. So we're on to a good start here. So now let's start drawing the actual cabinet boxes. Remember when I showed you earlier about creating a box and using the shell tool to make the box? It doesn't work parametrically when I make those copies as we saw earlier. I have to do a little bit more work, a little bit more modification. So what we're going to do is we're going to establish all of our lines, our guidelines to make the panels. And you could do this in 2 ways. You could actually model out each panel, or you can draw the entire cabinet box and then use the split tool later on to make the individual panels for measurements. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to establish some guidelines here. So I'm going to draw that so that it does not connect with that edge. As you can see, once I connect that edge there, if I were to try to move this edge, the entire thing is just going out of whack there. So my guideline will just simply extend outside of the frame. I'll make construction, and this I'm going to give a dimension of 3/4 of an inch for the top panel. There we go. Then I'm going to do the same for the bottom. Make construction and give me 3/4 of an inch. So if I didn't have these guidelines, I would have to go in and offset all 4 edges of that box and then go in and put in 3/4 inch for each of those edges. Having this guideline will allow me to automatically snap onto that line using the coincident constraint. And then all I have to do is go in for my side panels and give the constraint dimensions to those. And I'll show you how it's done. Here it is. I'm going to go in and draw a rectangle line here off of this edge and this edge and that edge and that edge, and the last one over here, that edge to that edge. Because this edge is linked to this guideline, I just have to simply adjust this dimension. Let's say it's 2 inch. Then the box thickness will change as well, but we're using 3/4 inch plywood, so we're going to keep it that way. However, I do have to go in and manually adjust these edges on the side panel. So I need to go in and give this a 3¼ inch dimension to keep it 3¼ inch no matter how I adjust the overall dimensions. Again, this is the tedious part that pays off in the end. When everything is set up appropriately, it's all going to work out and you can modify it as you wish. And I could go in and draw a line between these two areas and then give it equal spacing, but that's only if I need to make the modification and change every single side panel to a different dimension. But I know for sure I'm using 3/4 inch plywood, and therefore I don't need to do that, give that constraint of an equal dimension. So we're just going to go in and make this just 3/4 inch all around. I'm going to slide this down, make it a little bit closer. All right, so there we go. So if I go ahead and adjust this overall length, as you can see, if I can close this really quick, the boxes are adjusting, and the thickness of the material is also, it's staying 3/4 inch. And even if I change the height dimension over here, let's say, where's the top? The top of the, where is it? Yeah, that's the top of the plywood box, bottom of the plywood box. We're going to give that 24. As you can see, that adjusts quite nicely there. I'm just going to move these around, these numbers around, so I can clean things up and make sure it looks a little bit more legible. All right, so things are moving and modifying as I would like it to. Now that I have the base cabinet drawn out, we can go ahead and start extruding some of this out here. We're going to first extrude the base. The base extrusion, we're going to do 16 inches. You can see the extrusion on the history tab here. And within this extrusion tab, you can see there's a few options that we can play with. And I'm going to show you this extent option here when it comes to extruding the actual boxes. So let's go ahead and extrude these boxes. I'm just going to extrude them out to like 6 inches or so. Why did that not extrude the center portion too? Huh. Okay, extrude that. Extrude that. All right. Why is it cutting my side panel there? That is weird. That might be a glitch. Yeah, that is definitely a glitch. 1 second, guys, I need to figure this out. Okay, so I don't know what's going on. It's actually just extruding the top and bottom panels, which is okay. We can work with that. I just need to make sure that it's all going to link together, because now I have to go in and extrude the side panels here. Again, like that is the first time I've seen it. I've built this model 5 times, and that's the first time that I've seen that happen. All right, so there we go. Okay, I can work with this. Look, so let's take a look at the top panel here. I'm going to go to the history panel and take a look at this distance extent option. I'm going to change that to point. And what that's going to give me is this new option to select a surface or a body that the extrusion is going to extrude to. And I'm going to choose the base there. So that looks exactly what I'm going for. Yeah, so the top and the bottom panel is now being extruded to the face of the base there, because I set the object to that face. And so whenever I go into adjusting my depth, on the base. This is the base structure I'm talking about, the toe kick area. If I change that to 12, as you can see, the top and bottom panel also adjusts accordingly. So now I have to deal with the side panels, which again, it's not a big deal, but that's the first time I've seen it. I'm going to change the extent to point. I'm going to choose to follow my top panel, the face of my top panel. Back to object. This is so weird, guys. Okay, let's undo. Okay, undo to point for that. And yeah, there's still some bugs that they have to work out. Done. There we go. Okay. So now if I were to adjust my toe kick to 16, everything moves because the top and bottom panel is connected to my my toe kick base, and then the side panels are connected to or tied to the depth of the actual top panel there, the face of the top panel. So that's kind of yeah, that was a little bit quirky, guys. Sorry about that. First time I've seen it happen, and I'm scripting part of this out. That was not part of the script. That's the great thing about parametric modeling. All the components are linked together, and you're not just building components and copying and pasting these components. You're actually building a model that has parameters in it, and whenever you make modifications, you're modifying the parameters to make the adjustments. So now that I have the base cabinets already extruded, I can just go ahead and extrude the back panels. My back panels are always standard dimensions, so I'm not going to worry about linking things like that. I'm going to set the dimensions at 3/4 of an inch for my back panels, and that's it. I'm not going to need to connect that to anything at all. I'm going to leave the countertop where it is right now. I'm not going to extrude it because it complicates the future steps of projecting this edge to a new plane to create the doors. So I'm just going to leave it there for now. Let's start sketching the arch, and the goal of the arch is to have the arch, the shape of the arch, be intact no matter how wide I make the entire unit. And also I want to separate the spacing of the shelves equally no matter how high I adjust the height of the entire media center. I'm going to sketch one arch, and then once I extrude it, I'll mirror it to the other side. The first thing that we'll do is, actually before we get started, let's go ahead and clean up our model a little bit. There's a lot of little items on this side here, and it could easily get very disorganized. So I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to rename this folder base cabinet. Whoops, my cap lock is on. That did not change. Why did it not do that? Base cabinet. There you go. And since all of these bodies are tied to the base cabinet, we're just going to move it in there. And there we go. Our base sketch is still here, and we're going to work off of the base sketch for all of these sketching requirements. So the first thing that I will do is I'm going to establish a few lines, and these lines are going to give me the overall spacing for my upper sections. So I have two arch sections on the side, and then the middle is where the TV is located. And doing the same thing as we did before, I'm going to connect all these edges. Actually, let's keep it simple. I'll do exactly what I did before. I'm just going to connect the midpoints to the edges. Midpoints to midpoints. Points to edge. And then for these, I'm going to make construction. I actually also need to draw my exterior panel line. There we go. And if these dimensions get in the way, we can simply just close them off for now. So I have my interior construction lines here. I'm going to select equal, and it's going to equally divide up the upper partitions. Since the middle section is actually a large TV and I don't need this middle line, I'm just going to do make construction for that middle line as well. And let's start by determining the thickness of our legs. For me, it was 3 inches for the legs of the arch, like that. And then I'm just going to go up. Doesn't really matter dimensions right now. We'll determine that once we create the arch, because I want the legs to expand and contract as we need. On the other side too, 3 inches, and then we're going to raise up that vertical line there. So to create the arch section, I want to establish a midpoint or a midline that's going to allow me to do some symmetrical drawings. So I'm going to make that as a construction guideline. Now with these 2 lines here, you notice they're not the same height. They don't really have any connections to each other. I want to give them that connection. I want these 2 lines to move up and down together. So I'm going to use the symmetry constraint to do that. I'm going to select both of these lines. I'm going to hit the symmetry constraint, and it's going to be symmetrical about this mid guideline there. So as you can see, if I move one and adjust one, it's going to change. Then what I'll do is, since I want both sides to have the same thickness, I'm going to go down here to select that line that I drew that was at 3 inches, and I'm going to hit equal. That way, if I were to move this, the other side will also adjust accordingly. And usually this thickness will be set, so I'm going to set it at 3 inches and keep it at 3 inches. Next, let's work on the actual arch. For this, we're going to establish the height of the arch, the peak area. And I don't want this arch to pass this peak line here. I'll make this line a construction line, and I'm going to give the dimensions based off the top of our media console, media center. I'm going to give that a 6-inch limit. So what I'm establishing here is the arch will never pass this mark. To create the arch, let's go ahead and draw our line. It's throwing me off just a little bit, so I'm going to move it over so that I don't accidentally hit this midpoint there on that line. So I'm going to create my arch by getting 2 points and just doing random number. It doesn't really matter at this point, okay? So what I'll do is, because I don't want that arch to pass that 6-inch mark, I need to use the tangent constraints. The tangent is a line that a curve or a surface will touch but never cross. This will help keep the overall shape of the arch intact no matter how much we modify it. I'm just going to select my arch and that height line, hit the tangent, and if I can zoom in here, you can see how this line touches this edge, but it will never pass that edge there. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, because as you can see, if I were to move the leg height up and down, you can see how it passes over this edge here. So I need to create a tangent constraint on this side. And now it doesn't matter how much I modify that, it's never going to pass this edge here. So let's test this out by selecting our overall height. We're going to call this 80. Actually, that's the wrong height. We need to do the, there you go, 96. This, if we adjust this here to 108, you can see the length of the legs adjust accordingly, and the arch is still intact. Let's go back to 96. There we go. I got one side of the arch complete. Let's go ahead and draw the other side. We're just going to give it some random numbers for now. Since I've already established the constraints for this half of the arch, I'm going to just tell the other half to follow what this side is doing, which means we're going to use the symmetry constraint. That way, both sides will act the same. Symmetry, middle line there, and there we go. So now, if I adjust the length, it will adjust accordingly. And as you can see, the thickness of my legs is still 3 inches. My arch is still intact. The radius has changed. And everything is looking good. If I go back and change this to, let's say 115, that expands nicely. There we go. All right. Let's actually tie this guideline to the edges. So, perfect. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so now let's go ahead and draw the shelves. And that's pretty simple. We're just going to use a few of the constraints that we've been using. I'm just going to draw 2 lines. For each of my shelves. So for the bottom one, actually, I'm just going to use, since the bottom one, the height will all be the same. We're just going to draw, if I can, there you go. Draw one long line all the way to the other side. Being at the bottom here, side. And we're just going to draw 2 lines for the other side of the arch, other side of the shelf, sorry. All right, so now we got the shelves drawn. I'm going to draw a midline here that connects each of the shelf lines, the upper and lower shelf lines. And we're going to hit equal on these, like we've done before. Should be, why is it not? There you go, make construction. Make construction. I'm just going to re-highlight these and hit the equal button. So now all of our shelves are equal distance or equal thickness. And I'm going to give my thickness 2 inches. And I can always adjust this later on as well if I want a 6-inch shelf if I need to. Yeah, it doesn't really matter at this point. You can make it as thick as you want. Then I'm going to draw a separate line. These are going in between the shelves. So my first line here connect the bottom of the top to the top of the bottom shelf. And then my second line was the bottom of the bottom shelf to the top of the countertop. I'm going to do it same for this one over here. Actually, let's clean it up. Let's do midpoint there to this edge. Same thing, I'm going to go back and hit make construction on these. And I'll also hit the equal. All right, now if I were to adjust this to 150. Okay, you know what? I think I know what's going on. I did not create my my line for the top section here. So I need to establish a line for the top of the arch. So what this is going to do is, since I do have some statues that I'm going to put up on the top area, I want that height to be set. And that height is going to be set at 36 inches for now. Okay. And what's going to happen now is, since that top height is set, I can adjust this. And if you notice, now that works as I wanted to, as I intended. So let's make these construction lines. Okay. So what you saw there was this top is fixed, and then the bottom shelves will divide accordingly. It's going to give it equal spacing based off of how high I make the overall height of the project. But my arch here will always be 36 from the top of the arch down to the top of the top shelf there. And I can always change this to, let's say 30, and then the bottom will adjust accordingly. Let's go back to 36. There we go. Dimensions out. All right. So that is looking good. Things are moving according to what I'm looking for. Go. That's good. So you can see the shelf actually squeezes in and out whenever I adjust the total length. Sorry guys, talking and building the model is a little bit difficult. I do have some notes to help me, and also my throat is just so clogged right now. I'm getting through a sickness, so I don't know if that's coming through in the audio, but I do apologize for that. So to complete the upper section, we're just going to draw our upper line here to close it off. And I also need to create a fur down above the TV, and that thickness will be 4 inches. Actually, it was 3.5. 3.5. If I can get it. There you go. Oops. There we go. All right. That's going to be the fur down right above the TV. Now that the base sketch is done, we can go ahead and start working on the door sketch. I'm doing the door sketch a little bit differently. One way you can do it is you can actually draw it directly onto the face of the lower cabinet. I think that it gets a little bit messy and all the lines can get muddied. I'm going to use the projection tool to project the edge of the base cabinet onto a new plane. And to do that, we're going to create a new plane. You can see new construction plane. I'm going to base it off of that face there. And we're going to move it out however distance we need to. So let's just do 30 inches. Okay. And what I'll do now is I'm going to project the edge of my base cabinet. I'm going to select all my edges. Actually, let's hide the lower section here. Hide that just to clean things out. Okay, so I'm going to project these edges. Okay, and then I will select that face on the plane. Hit done, and there we go. So we have the outer edge of our cabinet boxes projected onto this plane here. And the reason why I'm doing this is I can then go back to the sketch. If I were to adjust this longer, you can see, well, something broke there. Let's see what's going on. Again, this might go back to that glitch that we saw earlier, because it's now missing references. Okay, so that may be a glitch. This is the first time that that's happened to me. What is supposed to happen, and you can kind of see here, if I make the adjustments to the base drawing, let's go 150. You can see the outline of the door. What is going on? That is not supposed to happen, guys. So let me do this really quick. So I'm just going to create a union on this. I'm just going to make it as one surface or one object. So we got the Boolean there, extrusion for the back panels, extrusion for this. We're going to clean this up. I'm going to move this right above the extrusion for the back panel to make it part of that timeline. All right, so that should work now. Let's go ahead and add our new plane. Let's hope this works. All right, so let's go ahead and project. our lines. First, let's not show the base. There you go. Project this, and onto that. Boom. All right, so let's take a look and see if it actually scales again. There we go. So it is giving me this warning because it's not recognizing this area here, which again, I am not sure why that's coming up, but it's working. So we got 250, let's go 150. And as you can see, the outline actually scales and moves nicely, which is exactly what we're looking for. Okay. Ooh, that was strange. Again, this is a beta version, so there's a lot of things that eventually they need to figure out and work out. But so far, there are ways, there are ways to work around it. Okay, so I have my new sketch here. I'm just going to close all this out. I'll create a new folder. Folder will be our door folder. And I'm going to put that new sketch and plane into the door section. There you go. All right, let's close out our sketch there. So I'm going to work off of this sketch here. And since I have 4 lower cabinet boxes, I need to make 8 doors. So we'll just add a few lines and divide up our doors. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There you go, 8. So I got 8 doors drawn there. And again, we're going to go back with our center line, connecting all the midpoints. And sometimes I recognize that the midpoints do not want to lock on. So we just have to go in and manually enter in our constraints or connect our constraints. So here, we're going to connect this line and it'll be midpoint. This point to this line, we're going to do this line, we're going to do go. All right, so now we're going to highlight that middle line. We're going to hit equal. Not giving me what I'm looking for. I go and manually select these. Equal. There we go. Not sure what happened. Midpoint. This point to this line, we need to do midpoint. Again, it's because it's not connecting to the actual line. Let's go ahead and make these construction line. So take a look at this 204. That moves. 170. That moves. 150. That moves. Okay, it looks like everything is working right. Got 2 doors in front of each of our drawers. Counted boxes, so good. All right, so now that I have the lines working, I'm going to establish another line at the top edge here. This line is going to be 1 inch below the countertop profile. So my profile is 3.5 inches. So what I'll do is I'll add 3.5 inches plus the 1 inch, and then I'll minus the material thickness of the countertop. That should give me the top height for my doors. So if I do the math here, this is going to be 3.5 inches plus 1 inch. Then I'm going to subtract 1 1/8 for the thickness of my material. And that will be my dimension there. So let's make sure that that line actually scales. Do 204, scales 150, scales to 250. That scales as well. So let's go back to 204. All right. The next part, you can either choose to add or not do at all. This is adding the gaps between the doors. This really depends on how accurate you want your model to be. If you're going to sell the model and plan to somebody for them to build themselves, I would definitely include all of these details. I would include the framing for the base cabinets. I would model out all the gaps between the doors. I would model out all of the individual panels for the cabinet box and the upper arch areas. That's because if somebody who's building this, they need those dimensions, and it's much easier for them to take a look at the model, take a look at each of these components, and pull dimensions from that. But let's say you're just trying to show a client a model quickly. I'm probably not going to model out all those details. I'm just going to do a general shape, general overview of what it's supposed to look like. And that's usually about it. In the end, the amount of time you want to spend on all of these details will vary depending on the end user. In this case, I'm not trying to sell these plans. You could download it and build it yourself. You do have to work at it and make the dimensions work out for you and figure out some of the dimensions. However, I just wanted to give you a model that you could play around with in regards to the history-based parametric modeling feature that Shapr3D has. Before you guys, I'm going to model out the gaps. We can go in and we can offset these dividing lines 30/2 of an inch on either side to give us a 1/16 of an inch gap. That's going to take too much time. What I'll do is I'm going to extrude the entire panel, and what I'll do is the panel is 3/4 of an inch thick. And what I'll do is I'll go back to my sketch and I will draw the gaps using a rectangle tool off of the center of my line here. So I have the center. I'll take this rectangle tool. I'm going to draw it to the upper and lower edge. And I'm going to give this a thickness of 1/16 of an inch. Done. And then I'll just repeat that for the other ones. So what we're going to do, we can actually just hit the equal constraint for the tops of these lines. Boom, equal. All right, that is perfect. So we're going to go in and we're just going to extrude these. Actually, let me hide the bodies. They're just very tiny. That's why if you want to spend the time just modeling out these gaps, it's totally up to you. But I am doing this for you guys. So that when you do download this model, you can be reminded of how much time I spent zooming in and zooming out for you. So we're going to extrude this out by 3/4 of an inch. Let's unhide our door. There we go. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do a subtraction. I'm going to hit the subtraction tool. I'm going to use these as our panels to subtract from, or use as the subtraction. And then when you create a Boolean, you can notice in the history panel here, whenever I made that subtraction operation, it gives me the option to keep the target bodies, keep the tool bodies. In this case, I can just click off of this tool bodies and it would hide that for me instead of me going in here and selecting on the left side panel to hide things. So that is very cool about the new features that they're bringing to us. So I have all my doors. Let's go ahead and see if they're going to scale. 150. Done. It scales. The gaps are still there. It's 250. Everything scales great. All right, the last thing with the doors is I need to create the profile for the integrated pool. And for this, I'm just going to do a direct sketch onto this side profile here. My angle that I need is 30 degrees. So we will create this angle at 30 degrees. So, and then we're just going to extrude it all the way over. And what we'll do is go back to our history, open up that extrusion, and we're going to change our distance to point. Our point will be the end panel, right? So no matter how long this thing expands, this extrusion will always be tied to this end panel. So now let's verify that. Let's go to 300. You can see the profile of our integrated pool is still intact. 304, 204. There we go. So that is looking good. So the doors are complete. Now, let's go ahead and all of these back into our door folders. There we go. So we want the doors to now attach to our cabinets, and no matter what depth our cabinets will be adjusted to, I want the doors to align to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the alignment tool and select up our bodies, hit the alignment tool, and we're going to select this edge here to be aligned with this edge. Then we're going to drag it down so that that corner lines up with our door. So done. And now if we were to change the bottom extrusion of our base to 18, you can see the door still connects to that, which is exactly what we're looking for. All right, now that we have the door where it needs to be, we can then start extruding our countertops. I'm going to extrude this face so that the front of the face of the countertop aligns with the front of the doors. So I have it there, and now we're going to go to our extrusion, change the extent to point. The point is the front of the door. Done. And now you can see we can make our adjustments again to the base, the toe kick here, 12. As you can see, everything lines up, which is perfect. 16. There we go. And then, so as you can see, there is this gap in between our door and the countertops. That's because we need our profile to be actually 3.5 inches. So I need to extrude just this edge here down 3.5 inches. But if I were to just pull this thing down, you can see the entire face comes down with it. So what I need to do is I need to split this face here from the rest of the body. So we're going to hit the split face tool, or split tool, split body actually. Split this using that, and done. So we're going to extrude this down to 3.5 inches, like so. And then we can choose to create a union for this if we want to, like so, there. And that is our countertop profile there. There's a lot of details, and if I were to draw this for a client, I probably wouldn't have done that profile and do it all complicated like that. I would probably just do the entire thickness and extrude that off of the sketch, and then worry about the measurement and details later when I actually go to build the project. So what I will also do now is, since there's this little gap and it visually is not supposed to, you're not supposed to see all the way into the cabinet there, I need to create a face frame. And for this, we're just going to add our construction plane, And we're going to move this back 3/4 of an inch in the negative direction. And then we're just going to select our entire lower cabinet body. We're going to hit the split body, and we're going to use a plane to split it. Now we can go ahead and hide our plane. We have this body that we created for the countertop. All right. Just want to make sure that things don't become too complicated. Okay, so we still have the baby body there. So now with this body, I'm going to hide that really quick. I can simply select this surface. And then we're going to hit the extrude button and go down to whatever given point. That is because we can go back to our extrusion here, change our extent to point, and the point is to be right below the ledge so that we don't see into the space, see into the cabinet box. There we go. All right, that cleans it up a little bit. All right, so now that we have the base cabinet pretty much done, so let's go ahead and start extruding the rest of the components. And I'm just going to extrude this out to wherever, hit the enter button, and then we're just going to go back here. And what I want to do is I want the entire upper section to sit 1.5 inches behind the front face of my countertop. To do this, I would first need to extrude it to a point, which is the face of my countertop. And then what I need to do is going back to the construction plane, add a construction plane, move that back 1.5 inches, like so. And then we're just going to do what we did earlier, which is to use the plane to split our body. That we want to hide this front area, so let's just go and hit it on this side here. There we go, plane. Perfect. So let's go and make sure that these are still moving and functioning correctly. So as you can see, we have 1.5 inch dimension from the face of our countertop to the face of the arch. And then the height is fully adjustable. There. Let's do like 150. See if we can get some extreme stuff here. Yeah, there you go. So things are looking pretty good, guys. Go back to 96, 204. Good. So now I can simply just mirror this half over to the other side using our center origin there, not this one, that one. There you go. Right, so the other side should move and scale accordingly as well. Beautiful. Perfect. And let's go ahead and extrude our shelves. We're going to do the same thing, extrude a little bit, then go to our history over here, change the distance, extent distance to point, front of our face, our arch face there. And I want these shelves to sit 1 inch behind the face, so we're going to repeat that process that we did earlier. Add a construction plane, back -1.5 inch. Actually, not 1.5. It should be just 1 inch. This 1 inch. There you go. So now it should be an inch. We're going to take all of our shelves and we're going to split it. Good. We're going to hide our plane. Hide our splits. There you go. All right, here we go. If we take a look at our base layer now, our base structure, the toe kick, if I were to move this to 12, everything moves accordingly. So you can see there's that maintaining of the distance between the front countertop front to the arch. Then I still got my 1 inch there. Then last thing we need to do is extrude this portion up here. We're going to change the extent to point. Our point will be the face of the arch, like so. Go back to the base cabinet structure. Go back to 16. There we go. And let's do the final extrusion on our back panels. Back panels will always be a standard dimension. In this case, these back panels are 1/4 of an inch thick. And that is it, guys. Whew, that was a doozy. At this point, I can go in and clean things up. Like I can take these two objects here and join them together using the union tool. It's like that, just to clean it up. So I can essentially take this entire model, go to a client's house, and visualize it using their AR feature. You could put this in the living room right in front of them using your iPad, which is really cool. So that is pretty much it, guys. This model is fully adjustable. The width, the height, if you want to adjust this, it's all fully adjustable for you, and you can go around and play with this model to your heart content because it is free to download. And all you have to do is check the link in the description down below. If you have a client that wants to build this, you can change the dimensions to whatever it is that you're working with for the client. And with a little bit of work trying to figure out the total dimensions and kind of calculating the material thickness and such, you can actually take this model and build it for somebody, build it for yourself or whatever. So thank you guys for watching. If you do want to check out the build, click on this video over here. If you want to see more Shapr3D tutorials, leave a comment down below, let me know, or you could click some of the videos that I have going on over here. Till next time, guys, this is About Design Craft Workshop. See ya.